The council of the Threxian Star Kingdom gathered beneath the crystal domes of Zather Prime. The air shimmered with heat and pride. Light from the twin suns poured through colored glass, painting the lords of the kingdom in gold and crimson. They sat on high thrones made of bone and alloy, their scaled hands resting on crystal arms, their jeweled eyes cold and certain. At the heart of the chamber stood the Chancellor, a tall, silver-scaled creature with 4 eyes and a voice that carried like thunder. He spoke a single line that would shape the fate of galaxies. The agenda, the conquest of the planet known as Earth. The room stirred. A ripple of whispers slithered through the chamber. Holograms of Earth spun in the air above them, a small blue sphere bright and fragile against the black. The data scrolls floated beside it, listing numbers, population, weapon yield, technology level, primitive, divided, weak. "Look at them," hissed Lord Verk, his tail flicking behind him. "Still burning oil, still fighting over soil. They cannot even reach their own moon without breaking their machines. A species of savages." Laughter echoed, cold, sharp laughter that filled the dome. "Their broadcasts are amusing," said another noble. "We've studied their signals, endless war, violence, chaos. They would destroy themselves in time. We might as well claim the world before it burns." The Chancellor raised a clawed hand and the room fell silent. "The humans have ignored our messages. Our ships were warned to stay out of their orbit. They dare to defy the will of Threx." His voice hardened. "They forget who we are." For 1,000 years, the Threxian Star Kingdom had ruled the Orion Arm. Their empire stretched across 100 worlds. They had crushed rebellions, enslaved entire species, and burned planets that dared to resist. They had never lost. Never. "The humans are untested," said General Jar, her armor gleaming like molten glass. "They are not yet part of the Galactic conquered. Their world is rich with resources, oceans of water, metals, energy. They will serve the kingdom well." The Chancellor nodded slowly. "Then we agree, the matter is simple." A ceremonial gong rang. The vote began. One by one, the lords raised their jeweled scepters. "For conquest," said Verk. "For conquest," said Jar. "For conquest," said the rows of nobles behind them. One by one, until 1,000 voices merged into one thunderous roar. "By decree of the Threxian Star Kingdom, we shall invade the planet Earth." The chamber erupted in celebration. Holograms of burning cities flashed around them. The nobles watched with satisfaction as simulations showed their armies landing, their banners raised over human ruins. But deep in the shadows behind the chamber, an old Threxian diplomat named Aerith kept silent. His scales were dull with age, his claws trembling slightly on his cane. He had seen what arrogance could do. He had seen the cost of believing too deeply in one's own invincibility. He looked at the hologram of Earth, small, blue, and shining with oceans and storms. A fragile world, yet something in it made him uneasy. "They are young," he whispered almost to himself, "but young species burn bright." No one heard him. The celebration drowned everything. Weeks later, in orbit above Zather Prime, the Threxian Armada assembled. 500 warships, their hulls engraved with gold and victory marks. The fleet stretched for miles, each ship a fortress of plasma cannons and shields thick enough to deflect a meteor. The soldiers stood in ranks, their armor glinting beneath artificial light. They sang the war hymn of Threx, a slow, rising chant that told of conquest and domination. At the head of the fleet stood Lord Zurath, commander of the Royal Navy. His eyes gleamed with ambition. Conquering Earth would cement his legacy forever. He stared at the hologram of the planet before him. "Prepare the jump. The humans will learn their place beneath the stars." As his ship, Empress of Dawn, began to power up its warp engines, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Light years away on the quiet blue planet, the humans went about their daily lives. They didn't know, not yet, but a few did. In a deep bunker beneath Geneva, the Terran Defense Coalition watched. Years ago, a secret network of astronomers and military minds had caught the first faint whispers, alien probes, signals too clean to be natural. They had kept the secret, hidden it beneath layers of bureaucracy and lies. They built quietly in shadows. When the Threxians launched their fleet, the warning came instantly. The Coalition's servers lit up with red alerts. The message spread through encrypted networks. "They are coming." World leaders gathered in an underground chamber. Presidents, generals, scientists, faces pale, eyes cold. For once, they didn't argue. For once, there was no talk of borders or ideology. The chairman stood. "We have one rule," he said. "No one steps on Earth and lives." And with that, Project Iron Curtain was activated. Satellites that no one knew existed came online. Subterranean railgun silos powered up. Fleets of ships hidden behind the moon warmed their reactors. Humanity, once divided, now moved as one. Back on Zather Prime, Aerith watched the fleet vanish into the darkness. The stars swallowed them whole. He turned to the Chancellor. "Have you ever faced a species that fights for its home?" The Chancellor laughed, soft and cruel. "They will kneel, they all kneel." Aerith looked again at the stars where the human world waited. He felt the faint tremor of unease, something ancient and instinctive. "And what if they do not?" he whispered. The Threxian fleet emerged near Mars. The red planet gleamed beneath them, lifeless and silent. Lord Zurath stood at the command deck, his voice calm. "Scan for their defenses. Begin orbital approach." His officers obeyed, tails twitching with excitement. The readings came back almost instantly. Minimal defense structures, no orbital fleet detected, primitive satellites only. Zurath smiled. "Excellent, proceed to Earth, prepare the message of surrender." The Empress of Dawn turned its bow toward the blue planet ahead. Earth filled the view, glowing with life, swirling clouds, endless seas. It looked harmless. "Transmit," Zurath said. A burst of Threxian code sped toward Earth, a demand for submission, translated into every human frequency. It promised mercy if they obeyed, annihilation if they resisted. They waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. No reply. "Perhaps they don't understand," one officer suggested. "Oh, they understand," Zurath said, narrowing his eyes. "They think silence will save them." He leaned forward. "Then we will teach them fear." The fleet began its descent. Far below, in a mountain bunker, alarms blared. The commander of the Terran fleet looked up from his screen. The alien message played in the background, cold and arrogant. He didn't flinch. "Activate curtain protocol," he ordered. "Let them come closer." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, they outnumber us 100 to 1. He smiled faintly. "Then they've brought enough to bury their dead." Outside, the night sky over Earth began to flicker as hidden defenses woke, silent giants waiting for the storm. And above them, in the void between worlds, the kingdom of Threx began its march into history's greatest mistake. The Threxian fleet entered the solar system like a storm of fire. Hundreds of ships shimmered in the black, their engines burning blue and violet, leaving trails of light behind them. The vast armada filled the silence between planets with power and arrogance. From the bridge of the Empress of Dawn, Lord Zurath looked down at the blue world that hung before him. Earth, so small, so bright. "Look at them," he said, his voice smooth and sharp. "They live like insects, crawling across their fields and oceans. They don't even know we're here." General Jar stood beside him, her armor gleaming in the glow of the ship's lights. "The reports confirm it, my lord. No orbital defense fleet. Their satellites are primitive. They use them for weather and maps." Zurath smiled. "Then our victory will be clean." The fleet began to spread out. Drones scanned the orbit. Bombers prepared their payloads. The order was simple: strike key locations, destroy resistance, and demand surrender. But something felt strange. The usual radio chatter from the planet, the constant hum of human transmissions, music, and noise was gone. The frequencies were silent. "Sir," said the communication officer, his frills trembling slightly, "we can't detect any transmissions. The human planet has gone dark." "What do you mean dark?" Zurath asked. "All signals gone, civilian broadcasts, commercial satellites, everything. Even the lights on the night side are dimming." Zurath frowned. "They're hiding from us." No one answered. The great blue sphere below them turned slowly, clouded in storm. Cities that once blazed bright now flickered and vanished into shadow. It was as if the planet itself had drawn a breath and held it. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in bunkers carved into stone and steel, humanity watched the invaders come. The command centers were silent except for the hum of machines. On a wall of screens, the alien fleet glowed like a field of stars. General Ryder stood at the center of the room, his uniform plain, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He looked at the fleet and said nothing for a long time. Then he turned to his staff. They think we're afraid. They're wrong, said a voice behind him. Commander Ishida, head of orbital defense. Ryder nodded. Let them come closer. A dozen operators began typing in perfect rhythm. Across the planet, buried systems came to life. Massive power grids hummed. Weapon silos opened under oceans and mountains. Orbital guns on the moon began to warm, their cores glowing red. A voice came through the intercom. Sir, we're ready for curtain activation. Ryder's hand hovered over the console. For a moment, he thought of his family, of his daughter, somewhere in the underground shelters, drawing stars on a piece of paper. Then he pressed the button. Activate Iron Curtain. At that moment, Earth disappeared. From orbit, the Threxian fleet watched in confusion as a field of electromagnetic interference bloomed across the planet. Sensors went blind. Communications turned to static. What is happening? Jar hissed. Unknown, General, the science officer said. Some kind of shield? No, not a shield, a cloak. We can't scan the surface. Zureth snarled. Then we burn through it, begin the bombardment. A dozen warships aligned their cannons. Plasma fire burst from their sides, screaming toward Earth's surface. The blue atmosphere flared white, and then, to their shock, the fire disappeared. The blasts were gone. No explosions, no impact. Report, Zureth roared. Our weapons dissipated, the officer stammered. The energy was scattered. The planet's magnetic field has been altered. Before anyone could react, the ship shook. Alarms blared. Multiple projectiles incoming. From where? Jar demanded. From below us. From hidden launch sites buried deep beneath continents, Earth struck back. Railgun slugs the size of buses screamed into orbit at 20 kilometers per second. They cut through Threxian shields like knives through paper. The first hit took out the destroyer Veil of Dawn, split in half before its crew even understood they were under attack. A second projectile ripped through another cruiser, turning its reactor into a sunburst that lit the dark side of the moon. Humanity had not been idle. For decades, they had built weapons under the skin of their world, silent, secret, patient. And now they unleashed them all. Target confirmed, impact achieved, next volley ready. Ryder watched the screens light up with enemy losses. His face was stone. Keep firing, don't stop until they break. Panic spread through the Threxian fleet. They had never fought an enemy like this. Shields failing. Evasive maneuvers. Where are the attacks coming from? They could not see them. They could not track them. Every time they fired, their shots vanished into nothing, scattered by the planet's field. But every time the humans fired, another ship fell. General Jar slammed her fist against the console. This is impossible. They were supposed to be primitives. Zureth's jaw clenched. They are not primitives, they are predators. The bridge lights flickered as another explosion rippled through the fleet. A massive debris cloud drifted past the Empress of Dawn, the broken hulls of their own ships. We underestimated them, the communications officer whispered. Zureth turned slowly, his voice low and deadly. No, we woke them. Back on Earth, the humans didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no pride. Only grim silence as operators marked off enemy ships like lines on a ledger. Ryder stood at the window, staring at the burning trails in the sky. They'll retreat, he said quietly, or they'll try something desperate. They won't stop, Ishida said. They're an empire, they don't know how. Then we teach them. In orbit, the Threxian fleet reformed. Zureth ordered the second wave. If the planet defends itself, he said, then we destroy its defenses, total bombardment, no survivors. Jar hesitated. My lord, their counterfire. I said fire. The fleet obeyed. Plasma storms roared down upon Earth, and the world answered back. From the moon's shadow, hidden human warships emerged, black as night. They were smaller, faster, and brutally efficient. Missiles tore through the void, guided by algorithms the aliens couldn't jam. The Empress of Dawn shook violently as explosions ripped across its flank. Where did they come from? Jar shouted. Zureth stared at the dark ships darting between the stars. They were waiting. They wanted us to fire first. A human transmission cut through the static. A voice, calm, steady, and unmistakably human. To the invading fleet, you are trespassing in Terran space. You will not survive this mistake. For the first time, the Threxians heard the human voice, not pleading, not begging, but filled with cold certainty. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Then, one by one, the Threxian ships began to fall. Hours later, the sky over Earth burned with the wreckage of an empire. The oceans glowed with falling debris, and the air was filled with streaks of light. Ryder stood among his officers, eyes fixed on the sky. "Is it over?" someone asked. He shook his head. No, this was just the first wave. Far above them, what was left of the Threxian fleet limped away into the dark. But their message had already been sent home, a broken transmission filled with static and horror. The proud kingdom of Threx would soon learn what Earth had become. A world that bows to no one. And in the silence that followed, humanity waited, ready for the next war. The Threxian fleet hung above Earth like a crown of fire. 1,000 lights shimmered across the void, each one a warship carrying the pride of an empire that had never known defeat. They had come to conquer, not to negotiate. From the bridge of the Empress of Dawn, Lord Zurath looked down upon the blue planet with growing frustration. It had been hours since their arrival, and still no surrender had come. No message, no plea, no acknowledgement, just silence. "Maybe they are paralyzed with fear," one of his officers said with a sneer. But the silence stretched too long, too still, too deliberate. Zurath felt it like a shadow crawling across his scales. "No, this is not fear," he muttered. "This is planning." Far below, under miles of steel and stone, the humans waited. The command center of the Terran Defense Coalition thrummed with quiet energy. Rows of screens displayed the alien fleet, glowing like stars against black space. Every heartbeat was counted, every breath timed. General Ryder stood at the center, his hand gripping the edge of the war table. His voice was calm, but his eyes were cold. "They're in position," said Commander Ishida. "All guns locked, targets confirmed." Ryder nodded. "We've given them their chance to turn back." "Do we fire, sir?" He looked at the image of Earth on the main display. It was beautiful, blue, alive, fragile, and behind it, the ships of an empire that thought itself untouchable. "Fire," he said, "for Earth." The void erupted. From the shadows of the moon and the depths of the oceans, Earth's vengeance roared to life. Railgun slugs, dense, metal projectiles accelerated to impossible speeds, shot upward like silver lightning. Each one burned white-hot as it left the atmosphere, trailing plasma and fury. In the silence of space, they moved faster than sound, faster than thought. The first struck the Veil of Dawn. The ship didn't explode, it simply came apart, torn in half by a kinetic force that no shield could stop. The second slug hit a cruiser near it, vaporizing its engines and sending it spiraling into its sister ship. The Threxian fleet faltered. "Incoming fire, impossible, there's no launch signature." "Shields failing, impact on Sector 7. "Who is firing? Where is it coming from?" Lord Zurath spun toward the tactical screen, his heart's pounding. "Find their fleet, find their weapons." "There's nothing, my lord," an officer cried. "No ships, no stations, the projectiles just appear." But they didn't appear, they came from everywhere. From beneath the polar ice, from hidden launch bases in deserts and oceans, from the black side of the moon where human warships drifted silent as ghosts. The aliens had come expecting primitive rockets. Instead, they faced a planet that had turned itself into a gun. Back in the command bunker, General Ryder didn't blink as red markers vanished from the map, each one a destroyed alien ship. "Keep firing," he ordered. The operators obeyed, their faces pale but steady. The room shook slightly as more weapons launched from hidden silos, each blast of compressed magnetic force echoing through the mountain. Ishida glanced at him. "They'll realize what's happening soon." "Then we'll stop hiding," Ryder said. "Let them see what they woke up." On the Empress of Dawn, chaos reigned. The deck trembled as explosions rippled across the fleet. Smoke filled the bridge, officers shouted over alarms. "Shields are useless." "Armor breach on the Starweaver, they're breaking apart." Zurath slammed his clawed hand onto the console. "Return fire, fire everything." The fleet unleashed its fury. Beams of plasma and particle bursts rained down on Earth, but the humans had prepared. Hidden shield grids deflected the first wave. Energy dispersed through ionized layers in the upper atmosphere. Even when a few shots landed, they hit decoy cities, fake heat signatures projected across empty plains. The Threxians fired again, and again, but each time the planet seemed to shift, twist, and disappear. "Sir," shouted Jar, "we can't lock targets. The humans are jamming our sensors." "Jamming us?" Zurath spat. "With what?" The answer came when the stars themselves flickered. Massive satellites emerged from the darkness, black panels the size of mountains, reflecting the sun's light away. They bent radiation, scrambled scans, turned the battlefield into a storm of static and ghosts. Zurath felt the first real chill of fear. What kind of monsters hide their planet like this? And then it got worse. From the moon's shadow, the first Terran warships appeared. Black steel hulls gliding silently, their designs simple but deadly. They moved without light, almost invisible. Each one carried weapons forged not for intimidation, but for destruction. A Threxian gunship turned to engage them. Before it could fire, a human missile tore through its hull. Another followed. Then a railgun shot split it open like paper. One by one, the Threxian ships began to vanish in blinding flashes of light. "Who are these people?" whispered an officer on Zurath's bridge. "They fight like demons." "No," Jar said softly, her voice breaking. "They fight like survivors." Back on Earth, General Ryder watched the feed from the warships. The alien fleet was breaking. The sky above the planet was filled with falling fire, the wreckage of ships that had once ruled entire star systems. He leaned forward. "Send the message." A transmission burst into the void, sharp and cold. "To the invading fleet. This is the Terran Defense Coalition. You are trespassing in human space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." On the Empress of Dawn, the bridge went silent as the human voice filled their speakers. The translation was perfect, each word like a hammer strike. Jar stared at the transmission window. "They speak our language." Zurath didn't answer. His claws dug into the metal rail beside him. "No, they learned it. They wanted us to understand." Another explosion rocked the ship. Consoles went dark. The stars turned red through the cracked glass of the viewport. "Orders, my lord," an officer cried. Zurath closed his eyes for a moment. "Retreat," he whispered. "Retreat." As the remains of the Threxian fleet limped away, their communication systems filled with screams and static. Behind them, Earth glowed faintly, wrapped in a halo of defensive fire, not broken, not conquered, but alive and furious. In the Terran bunker, General Ryder watched the final ships vanish into the darkness. "We did it," Ishida said softly. Ryder shook his head. "No, they'll come back, empires always do." He turned to the screen showing the alien homeworld's coordinates, transmitted by a captured drone. "And next time," he said, "we won't wait." Outside, the people of Earth looked up at the night sky. The falling wreckage of alien ships painted streaks of red across the heavens. To some, they looked like shooting stars. But to those who knew, to those who had fought, they were not stars. They were warnings. And every burning light in the sky whispered the same truth. Humanity bows to no one. The stars burned quietly over the ruins of the Threxian fleet. Fragments of alien ships drifted through space, their fires fatting, their metal twisted into the shapes of ghosts. The silence after the battle was deep, the kind of silence that came only after something terrible. On the Empress of Dawn, the once-proud flagship of the Threxian armada, sparks hissed through the broken command deck. Smoke filled the air. Crew members shouted in panic, their tails coiling in fear as fires spread across shattered consoles. Lord Zurath sat slumped in his command chair, one arm clutching a wound across his chest. The proud armor that had gleamed before now hung cracked and blackened. "Damage report," he rasped. "Engines crippled, shields gone," said a trembling officer. "Half the fleet destroyed, the rest are in retreat." Zurath's eyes, once sharp, now dim, turned toward the blue world below. Earth still glowed like a jewel in the darkness, untouched, defiant. He hissed softly, "They should not have been able to do this." General Jar stood beside him, her armor scarred, her voice low. "They were ready for us. They've been ready for years." Zurath gritted his teeth. "Impossible, their technology." "Doesn't matter," Jar interrupted. "They don't fight with technology, they fight with fury." Zurath said nothing. Fury. Yes, he had seen it, the terrifying precision, the cold silence of a people who refused to surrender. The humans hadn't fought for conquest or glory, they had fought for home, and that, he realized, was far more dangerous. Below, in the shadowed halls of Earth's Defense Command, the victory had come with no joy. The screens that once glowed with the symbols of enemy ships now showed empty space and static. The war room was filled not with cheers, but with the sound of exhausted breathing. General Ryder stood at the center, his hands resting on the table, eyes fixed on the feed from orbit. The world was safe, for now. But thousands of lives had been lost in the defense grids, on the orbital platforms in the first strikes. Commander Ishida approached him. The fleet reports 38% losses. The lunar defense grid took heavy damage. We've lost contact with Station Titan. Ryder's jaw tightened, and the enemy. Retreating, what's left of them? Ryder closed his eyes briefly. They'll be back. Empires never retreat forever. He turned toward the window, where the horizon glowed faintly with the light of re-entry fires. Bits of alien ships burned as they fell, streaking across the night like dying comets. Behind him, one of the young officers whispered, "We did it. We actually did it." Ryder didn't answer. He couldn't. He felt no pride, only the heavy, cold weight of what was coming next. Far from Earth, deep in the dark between stars, the surviving Threxian ships regrouped. Their proud banners were gone. Their communications were filled with static, broken voices and disbelief. On the crippled Empress of Dawn, Zurath stood before his crew, his body trembling with pain and fury. "Transmit to the kingdom," he ordered. "Full report, tell them we have met a predator." "But my lord," the officer stammered, "the council will not believe it." "They will," Zurath said, his voice a whisper, "when they see how few of us return." Jar approached him. "What will we tell them? That the humans defeated the Threxian fleet?" Zurath turned toward the viewport. Earth's light still glimmered faintly behind them. "Tell them the truth. Tell them we struck a sleeping beast." When the message reached Zather Prime weeks later, it spread like wildfire. The grand halls of the Threxian Council, once filled with laughter and arrogance, now trembled with fear. The nobles who had cheered for war now avoided each other's eyes. The report was clear: 80% of the invasion fleet destroyed, remaining ships retreating, Earth undefeated. The Chancellor slammed his clawed hand against the marble floor. "Impossible! A primitive species cannot do this." But Aerith, the old diplomat who had warned them before, stepped forward from the shadows. His eyes were calm but cold. "You called them savages," he said quietly. "But tell me, Chancellor, what kind of savages turn a planet into a fortress?" No one answered. Aerith continued, his voice trembling with both fear and grim respect. "You have awakened a force that does not conquer, it defends, and it will never forget what you tried to take." The council fell silent. For the first time in centuries, the mighty kingdom of Threx felt something unfamiliar, dread. Back on Earth, humanity did not rest. In orbit, wreckage was gathered and studied. The fallen ships were pulled into dockyards and dismantled piece by piece. Their technology was examined, copied, and learned from. Humanity adapted faster than any species the galaxy had ever known. Ryder stood aboard one of the recovery platforms, watching engineers walk across the cracked hull of a captured Threxian cruiser. Its alien symbols glowed faintly, as if the ship itself mourned its lost empire. One of the engineers approached. "We can use their materials, General. The alloys are strong, lighter than ours. We can rebuild the fleet." Ryder nodded slowly. "Do it. Every piece of this ship goes into something new, something better." He looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once felt so distant. Now they looked closer. They looked like possibilities. "We won't hide again," he said quietly. "Next time we take the fight to them." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the story of Earth spread faster than light. Traders whispered it in secret. Miners told it around campfires. 1,000 species that had once feared the Threxian kingdom now spoke a new name in awe and terror: humans. They said the humans had fought off an empire, that they had destroyed an armada with the weapons of their own world. Some said the humans had no mercy. Others said they didn't need any, that mercy was a luxury for those who didn't know loss. In distant systems, children of alien worlds looked up at the stars and wondered, what kind of creatures live on that blue planet? And in the shadows of the galaxy, old enemies began to reconsider their ambitions. If the humans could do this to the Threxians, who would be next if they were angered again? On Zather Prime, the Chancellor sat alone in his private chamber, watching the broken fragments of the invasion footage. He saw his fleet burn. He saw Earth's surface light up with fire. He heard the human voice again, calm, cold, unstoppable. "You are trespassing in human space. You will not survive this mistake." The words echoed in his mind long after the recording ended. He turned to Aerith, who stood silently at his side. What will they do now? Aerith's eyes were old, tired, and certain. They will rebuild, they will grow, and when they come, he looked toward the stars. They will not come to beg, they will come to end the kingdom that tried to break them. The Chancellor's claws trembled. Then we must prepare for war. Aerith shook his head slowly. No, Chancellor, the war has already begun. Far across the void, in a quiet moment above the blue glow of their home, General Ryder stood alone on the observation deck of a Terran ship. The Earth turned slowly below him, calm and peaceful, but he could see the scars, the places where the battle had burned the sky. He whispered softly, "You came to our home, you thought we were weak." He closed his eyes and felt the hum of the engines beneath his feet, the heartbeat of a new age. "Now," he said, "you'll see what happens when humanity fights back." The stars outside seemed to flare brighter, as if the universe itself was watching, waiting, and realizing too late what it had done. The kingdom had started a war. Humanity would finish it. The night above Earth was quiet again. The wreckage of the Threxian fleet had long since burned away in the upper atmosphere, and the skies had turned blue once more. From the surface, it seemed as if the war had ended. But those who had fought, those who had watched their world almost fall, knew the truth. The war had only changed direction. General Ryder stood on the deck of the TDF Resolute, humanity's newest warship, built partly from alien wreckage, partly from human steel, and wholly from vengeance. The ship was black as the void, its hull sleek and sharp. It carried no bright banners, no markings of pride. It was made for one purpose: retribution. Ryder looked out through the viewing glass as Earth shrank behind him. For the first time in history, humanity was not the hunted. They were the hunters. "Status report," he said. Commander Ishida stood beside him, her expression as hard as steel. "Fleet is ready, 74 ships operational, all systems green, jump drives charged." "Destination?" Ryder asked, though he already knew. She brought up the holographic display. The map of stars flickered into being, glowing red at one point, Zather Prime, the heart of the Threxian kingdom. Ryder stared at the light, set the course. Ishida hesitated. "Sir, if we strike their capital, we risk." "I know the risks," he interrupted quietly. "But they brought war to our home, now we take it to theirs." When the fleet entered Threxian space, there was no warning, no declaration, no demand for surrender. The first sign of humanity's return was the sudden silence of Threxian communications. Satellites blinked out, relays died, and warships vanished from sensors. The humans didn't march in with pride. They struck from the dark. Hidden drones released from the Resolute swarmed through the system, jamming every frequency, severing every network. Then, in one coordinated strike, the Terran fleet descended upon the Threxian colonies. The first target was a mining world called Varkos 7. It supplied metals for the kingdom's shipyards. The humans didn't waste words. They disabled the orbital defenses in seconds and fired precision shots into every military outpost. The planet's surface burned, not with cruelty, but with efficiency. "Target neutralized," Ishida reported. Ryder nodded. "Move on." There were no cheers, no joy, only purpose. On Zather Prime, panic spread faster than light. The great halls of the Royal Council trembled with alarms. "How did they find us so quickly?" the Chancellor demanded. "They didn't find us," said Aerith quietly. "They knew exactly where to look." Reports poured in, fleets destroyed, colonies gone silent, factories turned to ash. The humans weren't conquering. They weren't occupying. They were dismantling the empire piece by piece. Aerith looked up at the stars visible through the dome ceiling. "We called them savages," he whispered. "Now they act with more discipline than any army we've ever known." The Chancellor's scales rippled with fear. "What do we do?" Aerith met his gaze. "Pray they stop." On the Resolute, the air was heavy with exhaustion. The crew worked in silence, moving from one target to another. Each victory brought no celebration, only more sorrow. Ryder stood alone in his quarters, staring at a photograph taped to the wall, a small girl with bright eyes and a smile full of innocence. His daughter. He touched the photo gently. "We're safe now," he whispered, "but at what cost?" He thought of the Threxians, soldiers dying as he once had seen his own. Worlds burning, families hiding. He knew what vengeance felt like. He knew it didn't heal, it hollowed. But still, he gave the orders, because if he didn't, they would come back. The Threxian fleet finally assembled near their homeworld. 1,000 ships, the remnants of their might, stood between humanity and the planet Zather Prime. Lord Zurath, scarred and furious, commanded the defense from his new flagship, the Crown of Threx. His voice roared across the channels. "They will not reach our world. For every ship they destroy, we will destroy too." But even as he spoke, the human fleet arrived, not in a blaze of light but in silence. The Threxians prepared to fire, yet their targeting systems flickered and died. Their sensors showed nothing, empty space. Then out of the dark, the Resolute appeared. Its railguns lit up like a second sunrise. The first volley shattered the Threxian front line. The second tore through their carriers. Human ships moved like shadows, faster than the enemy could react. Every time a Threxian ship fired, the humans were already gone. Zurath slammed his clawed hand on the console. "How do they know our maneuvers?" Jar, standing beside him, spoke with quiet dread. "Because they learned from us, they studied us." The battle raged for hours. Explosions painted the void red. Debris filled the space between worlds. On the bridge of the Resolute, alarms screamed and lights flickered. Ishida shouted over the chaos. "Enemy reinforcements incoming. They're trying to flank us." Ryder didn't hesitate. "Then we meet them head-on." The Resolute turned sharply, its engines roaring. Plasma beams scraped across its hull, but the armor held. The ship's massive railgun charged one final time. "Target their command ship," Ryder ordered. A single shot echoed across the stars. The projectile, a dense tungsten spear, flew faster than any eye could follow. It hit the crown of Threx directly through its center. The explosion was silent, vast, final. When the light faded, there was no Threxian flagship, only drifting pieces of gold and glass. On Zather Prime, the Council received the transmission. The last image of Lord Zurath's face, proud, furious, and then gone. The Chancellor's voice trembled. "They've reached the system. What do they want?" A few seconds later, a signal arrived. It was simple. A single file broadcast to every channel in the kingdom. It showed the faces of the Threxian nobles who had voted for war, each one marked with the word guilty. Then came a voice, human, deep and calm. "We are not your slaves. We are not your prey. You came to our home and brought death. Now we bring truth." The screen went black. Moments later, the human fleet entered orbit. But they didn't fire on the cities. They didn't burn the world. Instead, they destroyed one structure, the Grand Council Spire, where the war vote had been cast. When it fell, the entire planet watched in silence. From the bridge of the Resolute, Ryder stood motionless as the spire crumbled on screen. Ishida's voice was soft. "Sir, we could finish them." He shook his head. "No, let them live with what they've done. Let them remember." He turned toward the stars. "We've done enough killing." The fleet began to withdraw, leaving behind the broken heart of an empire. In the days that followed, every Threxian world fell silent. No one spoke of conquest again. The once proud kingdom became a memory, its banners torn down, its songs forgotten. And in every tavern and spaceport across the galaxy, whispers began. They came from the blue world. They destroyed an empire. They didn't conquer, they punished. And somewhere in the black between stars, a simple phrase became legend. "Do not come to Earth." As the Resolute sailed home through the quiet dark, Ryder looked out at the stars once more. They no longer seemed distant. They looked like a warning. He whispered almost to himself, "We were human once, now we're something else." Behind him, the stars burned, bright, cold, and eternal, watching the rise of a species the galaxy would never again underestimate. Humanity had answered, and the universe would never forget. Zather Prime had never been silent before. It was the jewel of the Threxian Empire, a world of shining towers and endless light, where the songs of victory once filled the skies. Now those towers were cracked, the skis gray, and the songs replaced by whispers of fear. In the heart of the capital, the Royal Council gathered once more under the Great Dome. It was the same place where, months ago, they had voted to invade Earth with laughter in their throats and greed in their hearts. Now, they met under the shadow of ruin. The Chancellor stood at the head of the table, his armor polished but his eyes empty. Around him sat the remaining lords and generals, their scales dull, their confidence broken. The memory of the Terran fleet still haunted their dreams, the black ships, the precision strikes, the silence before the storm. "The humans are gone," the Chancellor said at last. "They destroyed our fleet, then left. They could have taken our world, but they did not. Why?" No one answered. The room was thick with unease. Finally, a frail voice broke the stillness. It was Aerith, the old diplomat. His scales shimmered faintly in the dim light. "They did not come to conquer," he said. "They came to show us what conquest costs." A murmur passed through the room. Some hissed in disbelief, others lowered their eyes. "Don't speak like a coward," snapped one of the generals. "They attacked our worlds, they burned our fleets. That is not mercy." Aerith's gaze was steady. No, it was justice. Across the city, the people of Zathar watched the sky. And there above the clouds, a single human warship hung, TDF resolute, black and silent. It didn't fire, it didn't move. It simply watched. Every Threxian on the planet could see it, a dark shape that filled the heavens with dread. Children whispered that it was the Eye of Earth, come to judge them. Inside the Resolute, General Ryder stood alone at the observation deck. His reflection stared back at him, tired, hardened, changed. "They're not fighting back," Ishida said beside him. "Their defenses are down, the world is open to us." Ryder didn't move. They already lost. "So why are we here?" she asked quietly. He turned to her. "Because they need to remember." He pressed a button on the console. A signal pulsed through the void, a transmission sent to every device, every channel, every citizen of the Threxian kingdom. The message began with a voice, human, calm, and unshaken. "To the kingdom of Threx, you came to our world with arrogance and fire, you called us weak, you killed our people, you thought we would bow." The sound of Earth's thunder filled the background. Then came the images, burning Threxian ships above Earth, the fall of their own fleets, the destruction of their council's spire. "We do not conquer, we do not enslave, but we remember, and we ensure that those who bring war to our home never do so again." The transmission ended. For a long moment there was nothing. Then across Zathar Prime, the towers dimmed their lights, not by command, but by shame. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The Chancellor's claws tapped against the table. "They threaten us with words." "No," said Aerith softly, "they threaten us with truth." He looked up at the dome, where the faint shadow of the human ship hung like a scar against the stars. "And truth lasts longer than fear." The Chancellor's tail lashed the floor in frustration. "We must rebuild, gather what fleets remain. If we show weakness, the other empires will destroy us." "And if we show strength?" Aerith asked. "The humans will return. You saw what they did to our armada. Do you truly believe we can stop them?" The room went quiet again. Then one of the younger lords, her voice shaking, whispered, "What do we do?" Aerith closed his eyes. "We change." Hours later, as night fell over Zathar Prime, the Chancellor stood alone in the ruins of the Grand Spire. The great structure, once a symbol of power, was now a skeleton of broken beams and scorched glass. He looked up and saw the Resolute descending lower, not close enough to strike, but close enough to cast a shadow across the city. Then from the ship's hull, a beam of light cut through the clouds, projecting a symbol into the sky. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a weapon. It was a single emblem, the crest of Earth's Terran Defense Coalition. Below it, a line appeared in bold, white light. "We are watching." And then the ship began to rise, its engines igniting in a silent wave of gold. In the council chambers, the nobles watched through the transparent walls as the human ship left orbit. "They're leaving," someone whispered. "For now," another muttered. Aerith watched the engines fade into the black. "They will not come back, not unless we give them reason to." He turned toward the others. "Remember this day, remember what they did, and remember what they didn't do. They could have ended us, but they didn't." The Chancellor's voice was low, out of mercy. "No," Aerith said, his gaze hard, "out of warning." Far from Zather Prime in the depths of space, the Resolute cruised in silence. The crew moved quietly, carrying the weight of victory that didn't feel like one. Ryder stood at the front of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. Ishida joined him. "Do you think they'll learn?" she asked. He stared at the stars. "Some will, most won't, but the galaxy will know now what happens when you push humanity too far." He looked down at Earth's symbol glowing faintly on the ship's console. "We never wanted to rule, we just wanted peace." "And if peace requires fear?" Ishida asked softly. Ryder's jaw tightened. "Then let them be afraid." Back on Zather Prime, the people gathered in the streets, staring at the place where the human ship had been. For the first time in generations, they felt something stronger than pride, humility. Mothers told their children stories not of conquest, but of consequence. The banners of the old empire were taken down, the songs of victory were silenced. And high above, where the sky was once filled with the gleam of Threxian ships, now there was only the faint scar of light left behind by humanity's departure. A silent reminder that power did not make one invincible. In the quiet after the storm, a legend began to spread. They said the humans had come like gods and left like judges. They said their ships could kill stars, but chose not to. They said Earth did not seek war, but when war found it, even empires burned. And among the ruins of the once great kingdom, an old Threxian diplomat whispered a truth that would echo across generations. The humans have no thrones, yet the stars bow to them. For the kingdom of Threx, the trial was over. The sentence was memory. And across the galaxy, every species learned the same lesson. Never make Earth your enemy. The stars had grown quiet again. No more fleets burned. No more transmissions of war echoed through the void. The galaxy, so used to conquest and power, now lived under a silence made not by peace but by fear. The Threxian kingdom was gone. What remained were scattered worlds, broken colonies trying to rebuild under the shadow of their own arrogance. The once proud banners of gold and crimson were replaced with plain symbols of survival. No one spoke the name of the kingdom aloud anymore. It had become a curse. And in every tavern, on every outpost, in the farthest corners of the Milky Way, one warning passed from mouth to mouth, whispered over trembling drinks and quiet nights. "Do not go near the blue world." On the planet Earth, humanity rebuilt. Cities scarred by war rose stronger. Skies once choked with fire now shone clear. The people worked, they healed, but they did not forget. The Terran Defense Coalition became something more than a military force. It became a promise, a silent oath that humanity would never again be taken by surprise. In the new capital of Geneva Prime, General Ryder stood before the massive glass window overlooking the rebuilt city. The horizon was dotted with sleek ships, rising toward orbit like silver birds. The once hidden weapons of Earth were now symbols of unity. "They call us monsters," Ryder said quietly, watching the lights ascend. "Even after all this time." Commander Ishida stood beside him, her uniform crisp, her expression calm but thoughtful. "Perhaps we are, sir, but monsters don't protect what's theirs, they destroy it. We fought because we had to." He nodded slowly, "And they'll never understand that." Far away, on a trading moon once owned by the Threxians, a group of alien merchants huddled in a dim-lit bar. A hollow screen flickered in the corner, showing the image of Earth's flag, white and blue, the emblem of a planet united. "They say their fleet watches every jump gate now," whispered a merchant, his scaled hands shaking. "That no ship enters Sol without their permission." Another nodded, eyes wide. "I heard they captured a pirate crew last month, never even fired a shot. The humans disabled every system from halfway across the sector." "Then what happened to the pirates?" The first one hesitated. "No one knows. The Terrans sent them home. Their ship was still drifting, but every weapon was gone, every engine stripped clean, and carved into the hull were 3 words." He leaned closer, his voice barely a breath. "Do not return." The table went silent. Around them the air hummed with quiet dread. Back on Earth, the people carried the weight of victory in strange ways. Some were proud, others were haunted, but all of them knew that something fundamental had changed. Humanity had seen the edge of extinction, and instead of breaking, they had transformed. They had learned, they had adapted, and they had become something the galaxy could no longer ignore. At night, the children of Earth looked up at the stars not with fear, but with wonder. They were told stories of the First War, of the day aliens came and thought humanity weak, of the day Earth stood alone and said no. But the stories were not filled with glory or triumph. They were told as warnings. Because humanity remembered what it had cost. General Ryder retired 5 years after the war. His hair had turned white, his eyes lined with time, but his mind remained sharp. He moved to a small home by the sea, a quiet place far from the command centers and war rooms. Sometimes he walked along the shore at night, the waves brushing against his boots, the stars reflecting in the water like old ghosts. He thought about the faces of those who never came back, about the alien commander who had believed victory was easy, about the fire that had lit up the sky above Earth and changed everything. One evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, Ishida visited him. She still wore her uniform, the stars of command shining on her shoulder. "Still watching the sea, sir?" she asked with a small smile. He didn't look away from the water. "It reminds me that some things never change." She stepped beside him, quiet for a moment. "We've established new colonies beyond Mars, the fleet's expanding, the council's talking about exploring outside the Orion Arm." Ryder chuckled softly. "We used to dream about exploration, now everyone's afraid to come near us." "They fear us," Ishida said. "They should," he replied simply. "Fear keeps the peace." She turned toward him, her voice gentle. "And when the fear fades..." Ryder looked up at the night sky. "Then we remind them why it existed." Across the galaxy, the ripple of Earth's rise continued. Empires that once mocked humanity now avoided even saying the planet's name. Treaties were signed in silence. Ambassadors spoke softly when humans entered the room. In the halls of power, where rulers once plotted over maps of conquest, there was a new rule carved into every wall. Do not provoke the Terrans. On a small world near the edge of known space, a Threxian scholar taught a group of younglings. The war was ancient history to them, a story passed down like a myth. "Teacher," one of them asked, "did the humans really destroy the kingdom?" The old scholar's tail curled slowly. His eyes gleamed with memory. "They destroyed more than a kingdom, child. They destroyed the idea that power means victory." The children whispered among themselves, "But why did they let us live?" The scholar looked up at the ceiling where a small window showed the endless stars. He smiled sadly. "Because they wanted us to see what we had become, and what they became to stop us." He paused, his voice softening to a whisper. "They are not gods, they are not demons. They are what happens when survival becomes strength." Back on Earth in the Great Terran Fleet Academy, a young cadet stood at attention before a statue in the central plaza. It was a figure carved in black stone, a soldier in battle armor, standing tall, a rifle in one hand and the flag of Earth in the other. The words engraved at the base were simple. "We fought for home, we became the storm." The cadet saluted the statue, then turned his eyes to the stars. He didn't see peace, he saw duty. Because in the end, humanity's strength wasn't their weapons or ships. It was their will, the unbreakable belief that no matter the odds, no matter the enemy, they would endure. That night, from the farthest rim of the galaxy, a new ship left orbit, sleek, silent, marked with the insignia of Earth. It carried explorers, not soldiers, but etched along its side were words every captain swore to uphold. "We come in peace, but we remember." As it slipped into the dark, the stars seemed to shiver, because they knew what the galaxy had learned too late. Humanity was no longer just another species among the stars. They were the warning written in fire, the echo of vengeance, the whisper carried across worlds. They were the reason the universe stayed quiet at night. And though the fires of war had long faded, the legacy remained, burning bright in every heart, in every ship, in every whispered tale. Humanity had risen once, and now the stars would never forget them,